Harper Audio presents Thicker Than Water by Cal Flyn. Read by Cal Flyn. Prologue. Gippsland, Victoria, July 1843. Ronald McAllister was dead. The blacks had killed him. Angus McMillan's stable hand found the body at the side of the track, a half-mile from Alberton, a mess of blood and gore. They had dragged the lad from his horse, dragged him, flailing and yowling to the dust, dispatched him with their wooden clubs, and later, once he was dead, they had cut him. Though Angus knew Ronald well, had known him for years in fact, since he'd worked for the dead man's uncle, he had barely recognised him. The corpse had been stripped naked, the face disfigured, the insides left spewing out upon the ground. There were slashes in the gut where the gun-eye attackers had cut the fat from around his kidneys. All the settlers were in uproar. This time the blacks had gone too far. Not a sheep, nor a bullock, not even a shepherd or a stockman. This time they had killed the nephew of the big man, Lachlan McAllister himself, and a crime of this magnitude could not go unpunished. There must be reprisals. Angus felt the heavy weight of responsibility settling down upon his shoulders. For who else could lead the men of Gippsland? He was the founding father, the man who had led the way from the withered plains of the colony over the great dividing range. He was the one who had hacked through the snarls of stringy bark and tea tree, and finally guided them down into these green and fertile pastures. He had gathered his countrymen around him in the new land, and shown them the way that they must now live. There was no one else. In the end, retribution was not so difficult to organise. The men were fired up, just waiting for the touch paper to be lit. It didn't take much persuasion to amass a hunting party. By the next morning, every Scotsman in the district with a gun and a sound horse was assembled, ready for the off, baying like the hounds, baying for blood. They called themselves the Highland Brigade. A cry went up and the mob were off. The horses skittered under them, sensing but not understanding the tension in their riders, whose reins were short and faces set as they cursed in their native Gaelic, guttural and emphatic, and struggled for control. And all the time their eyes flitted along the skyline, searching for sign of the gun-eye. Overnight, every one of the Aboriginal workers had melted away into the bush, abandoning their posts on the homesteads and the cattle stations. They were as spooked as the horses by the strange charge in the air, the rumbling among their workmates and masters. The murder of Ronald McAllister had set something in motion that they couldn't yet predict, but they didn't want to be around to find out what it was. Word spread among the Highlanders that the blacks had been gathering down by the coast, where the sea pummelled its soft fists into the silver sweep of 90 Mile Beach. Someone had heard that the natives had been seen wearing the clothes of poor dead Ronald, clothes they must have stripped from the lifeless body before the blades were drawn, clothes that would be spattered with the dead man's blood. Another said that when the attackers were disturbed, they were squatting down beside the body with the clear intention of eating the dead man's flesh. They were inhuman, said somebody, and they all agreed. They were dangerous, murderous vermin that needed exterminating. Later, it would never be clear who had said exactly what to whom. At that moment, they were of one body and one mind. They looked around and saw only brothers and equals, united in pursuit of a common enemy. This was more than revenge. It was about securing the safety of their homes, the virtue of their women, and a future for their children. It was white against black, good versus evil, the triumph of civilization over barbarism. It would be impossible to identify the culprits of the McAllister killing, for what separated one black from another? Each was as murderous as the next, and was not the life of a McAllister worth 10 or 20 of the natives? The loss of a McAllister must be answered with whatever punishment was necessary to ensure that no white man would ever find harm at the hands of the blacks again. The Highlanders were armed, organised and angry. When, suddenly, they came upon the Aboriginal encampment, on a flat by a waterhole, nestled
Sample complete. Ready to continue?